Pokemon Sword and Shield alt arts, they've seen a bit of a bumpy ride recently, with a lot of them going up in price at the beginning of the year, and now things are starting to cool off. So it's now a really good time to be picking up some of these big Sword and Shield alt arts now that they've dropped in price. Well, today we'll be taking a look at PokeJace.io at what's been going on in the market, not just over in the US, but also over here and over in the EU, to give us an actual idea what's been going on with the raw price and the graded prices for a lot of these cards, because I think now's a good time to get some of these because they have dropped. Let's get it. All right, starting things off, we got my boy T-Tar coming in, Sleepy Boy. Absolutely love it. Beautiful card, amazing. However, this has been falling, so let's take a look what's been going on. So eBay, we're looking at $128, $144 on TCG Player, $95 on Card Market. Very, very interesting. And then in the PSA 10, we're looking at $284 with a population of over 3,000. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Mine is a PSA 8, which is crap, right? Absolute trash at $70. I mean, it's better raw, so you know, it's one of these things. It's just the way it goes. So let's take a look at this PSA 10 price. We can see is the green here. So it has actually been falling a little bit, but it is up on the year overall. So the PSA price, so it is up over the last 6 months, doing very well. So the PSA 10 price is doing okay, so that's fine. That's not too bad. It's gone down a little bit, but it is still on the uptick. Right, let's remove the PSA prices. Let's look at the raw prices. So I mentioned like a lot of these went up in price, and they did fall a little bit as well. So as we can see, we've got TCG Player in the orange, and we've got the market price in the blue. TCG Player still doing its own thing, where it is you know, on a world of its own compared to the rest of the average market price, but it is, you know, a little bit more reasonable recently. You know, they've come a little bit neck and neck there over the last couple of weeks, but still over the last 6 months they are up overall. So the Tyranitar is doing relatively well, even though it has dropped from its all-time high. If you look at TCG Player, it's 144. At one point it was 190, so it has dropped. But then if you go back and you look where it was 6 months ago, it was around $92, so it has gone up overall. That's not too bad, actually. That's not too bad, and then the average market price is still higher than it was before as well. So Tyranitar doing okay. Then we got the Flaming Chicken Blaziken KFC coming in from Chill & Rain. 182 on eBay, 296 on TCG Player, and 183 on Card Market. PSA 10, we look at $450 with 3,300 in a PSA 10. That's interesting. As you can see in the green, this is the PSA 10 price. Here we're looking at the high of $540, which is wild, right? But it has actually dropped recently, but it's still up on the past 6 months, right? We're looking at $450. You know, it's down there by around about 300, so it is up overall. Has dropped a little bit, has cooled off a little bit, but it's still up on the 6 months. All right, now let's get rid of the graded prices. I'm more intrigued about these wild, crazy TCG Player prices. So as you can see, the average market price is in the blue, and it's been pretty steady. It was around 300, but it's dropped recently. But I would say that drop might be a bit odd. But I would say, let's say it's around 250, to, you know, because it's kind of a big significant drop there. Whereas the TCG Player price was just in a world of its own. When it got to like May, it just went all the way up to $400, where the market price was $100 less, which is insane. But overall, over the past 6 months, it is up. You know, it was around that $150 to $200 range, and is now up on both of them overall in the past 6 months, even though it has dropped recently. So it's a potential good chance to get this one. All right, then we have the Umbreon. This one's been an interesting one. Now I have a PSA 10 Umbreon, and this sucker has dropped a little bit, but it's definitely gone up since I got it graded, which is the most important thing. Graded over a year ago. So we're looking at eBay, $759, TCG Player, $842. Card Market's quite high at $958, which is actually quite interesting. So in the green, we're looking at PSA 10. So it was $1,500 and is now dropped about $300 to go to 1.2. Still up on the overall 6 month period, where we're looking around about $800, $900 there. So it has gone up, you know, by about $300, which is very, very impressive. I'm happy with that. You know, even though it has dropped about 300, it is still 300 up overall. Now, when we look at the raw market price, they were neck and neck between TCG Player and the average market price. And then TCG Player had a world of its own in May. We've seen this trend of a lot of them, and it kind of went above and beyond what it's supposed to be. And they're a little bit closer now, so it's a little bit more reasonable. But still, we go back over the last 6 months, it is still, so we look at like the highest here, we look at raw price, $760, back down there is about 500. Was it a high at about 860? So it's dropped about $100 on TCG Player. You know, we're looking at 842. That's still quite a big jump, still like a $90 difference, but 842, pretty much, you know, dropped about $100 or so. but still up overall. So yeah, the Umbreon is still up overall, even though it has cooled off a little bit. And yes, there is over 12,000 of these in the PSA 10, which is an absolute insane amount. But I think because of how, big and the importance of this card, it's going to do very well. It's still going to do very well. We've got the Rayquaza VMAX from Evolving Skies. We're looking at 310 eBay, 386 TCG player, 424 on card market, quite high on card market. PSA 10, we're looking around $600 with 8,000 in a PSA 10, which is quite wild. Let's take a look at what's been going on. So the graded price up here was around $600 to $700, and overall right now we're looking around about $600. Still higher than it once was 6 months ago. So overall, the Rayquaza is doing very well in a graded PSA 10. Now we were taking a look at the raw prices. Of course, TCG player back in May in a world of its own, and continued to be in a world of its own. I mean, at one point, it was $527 on TCG player and $402 on the raw market price. Bearing in mind that card market is higher than both of these, that's crazy that we had that difference. And even now, the difference is still large. 386 to 310, that is a big, big difference. But it still is higher than it was over the past 6 months, even though it was insane, about 3 months ago. Then we've got the Sylveon VMAX from Evolving Skies. This one's been doing relatively well as well. This one's been an interesting one. So we've got 220 on eBay, 291 on TCG player, and 276 on card market. And we've got PSA 10 at $360. We've nearly 6,000 of them in a PSA 10, which is just crazy. So let's take a look here. Right, this is actually going to be quite interesting. So if we just look at the graded prices. So here we have the PSA 10, which is, was over $400, $430, and is now dropped to $360. So it has dropped a little bit. Still up overall over the past 6 months. There was a point, now I wonder if I can find it here, where they were pretty close with each other. Here we go. So we got the TCG player price and the PSA 10 price. So PSA 10's in the blue, and then we have TCG player in the orange, right? Look at this. At one point in July, PSA 10 was only like $10 to $15 more expensive than a raw Sylveon. Whereas you compared it to the raw market price, look how different it is. That's the raw market price down here. This goes to show kind of how skewed TCG player prices are. So that's where you got to look around. You got to shop around. Don't always look at TCG player. This is a prime example of TCG player just being dumb, to be honest. So yeah, as you can see, we get rid of the PSA price. You can see the difference, right? Again, we're looking at May, and the difference is just massive. I mean, 356 on TCG player, 247 as the raw market price. It's crazy. And even now, the price difference is massive. It's over $70 difference. It is still up over the past 6 months on both of them, but TCG player is just in a whole different world of its own. Then we got Glaceon as well. This one, again, I think we're going to have another example. We'll get to that in a minute. So we look at the eBay, 207, TCG player 288, card market 203, $330 in a PSA 10, nearly 6,000 coming up in a PSA 10 as well, which is actually crazy. Right, let's take a look at this. This is what I'm talking about, right? So we go PSA 10, TCG player. Similar to the Sylveon, quite literally $3 difference. I mean, this is just dumb, right? This is just dumb. A PSA 10 is the blue. Like, this was, bearing in mind, a few weeks ago. This is just crazy. This goes to show how skewed and easy manipulated TCG player really is. Look at the raw market price. This is what the market price should be, not where the TCG player price is. It should be down here. This just goes to show just how screwed it is. So when we take a look here, again, when we hit in May, this is what's been going on. A huge difference. Like, we're looking at nearly $100 price difference. Even now, you're looking at $100 price difference. Even though the past 6 months has gone up on both of them overall, again, like the Sylveon, just TCG player, easily manipulated. Then we got the Sylveon VMAX, which is my favorite card from the set. We're looking at 185 on eBay, 201 on TCG player, 214 on card market. This one's a bit more realistic, a bit more reasonable. PSA 10, $300. We're looking at nearly, just over 7,000 in the PSA 10, which is crazy. But this is a bit more realistic, right? So if we look at these, we'll get rid of the PSA 9, and we can see the difference between the graded prices. So PSA 10's up here, which is fine. Then we've got the green, which is TCG player, and then we've got the blue, which is raw. So raw and TCG player are kind of neck and neck. They're about right. And then the PSA 10 price is up here. And, we remove the PSA 10 price, and we can see, again, up over the past 6 months, has dropped from its all-time highs, but still doing relatively well, even though TCG player is massively inflated, or was massively inflated, and is now gone to back to more reasonable, realistic market prices. We've got the big boy Gengar from Fusion Strike. We're looking at $285 on eBay, $305 on TCG Player, $465 on Car Market. Crazy expensive. $600 in a PSA 10 with over 6,500 grade in a PSA 10. That's mental. So we have a look at this, right? Let's take a look first at the graded price. So obviously with the graded price here, was around the $800 mark, has dropped a little bit, but still up over the past 6 months. It was around $400. So it is doing relatively well in a PSA 10, of course. This card is ridiculously difficult to get and to get graded well as well. But look at the market price. We're looking neck and neck from TCG Player and the market. This is what it's supposed to be like. This is a prime example of good market pricing. This isn't just TCG Player going off on one, you know, in a league of its own. This is what it's supposed to be like. It's nice to see. You look at the past 6 months, it is up overall, which is pretty good. Not by much, but it is up a little bit over the past 6 months. This is probably one of the most volatile cards we're going to see, but this has been falling. Then we look at the Sylveon VMAX as well from Fusion Strike. 184 eBay, 220 on TCG Player, 231 on Card Market. Nearly 6,000 in the PSA 10 at $446 in a PSA 10. Alright, let's take a look at the prices. So PSA 10, we're looking at the orange. So it has actually gone up quite a bit over the past few weeks. We're doing very well, you know, for a PSA 10 for this Espeon. You know, going from 250 up to where it is now. And then when we take a look at the raw prices, we got TCG Player again in a whole league of its own. We just saw the Gengar, right? Really understandable market pricing. But then TCG Player, when it comes to the Espeon, is just on a whole different planet. I mean, this card's over $100 difference in June and is now starting to come back down to a somewhat more reasonable level, about $20 to $30 difference, which is fine. We're looking at high numbers, but for it to be that big is just so unrealistic. And we take a look now at the past 6 months, it's still up over the past 6 months. So it's done very well, but it has come down for this incredible, heavily inflated price. Now on to the Charizard V from Brilliant Stars. This one's a beautiful card. I love this one. 125 on eBay, 126 on TCG Player, 152 on Card Market, $277 in a PSA 10 with nearly 10,000 on that road. 10,000 for this Charizard. That is a lot. That is a lot. So let's take a look at the PSA 10 price for this one. We're looking at PSA 10 overall. It's pretty much the same as it was 6 months ago, which is not great compared to some of the other cards we've seen. And it did actually go to the high of around 400 and it has dropped about $130, which is actually quite a bit. Then we take a look at the raw prices. You know, TCG Player was a little bit off, but still relatively neat compared to what we've seen already. This is again a bit more reasonable. But over the past 6 months, look at this Charizard. It is pretty much where it was 6 months ago. This is one of the few cards that we've seen in this list today of all the old hearts that, if I'm being honest, is done very, very bad. You know, it hasn't really done much over the past 6 months. And I mean, it did actually climb and it was like, had good prospects. You know, you expected to go over 200. But then it just went back down to where it was over 6 months ago. Right, then we look at the Machamp V. Look at 95 on eBay, 127 on TCG Player, and 117 on Card Market. PSA 10 price of this was $270 with 2,644 in a PSA 10. I'm not a fan of this Machamp, I must admit, but I know a lot of people do like it. Let's take a look at the PSA 10 price. Doing very well, like very, very well. Compared to what we just saw with the Charizard, PSA 10 price is doing very well. Up over the past 6 months. Sitting at 268, nearly its all-time high, which is very, very impressive. Then we look at the market price. As you can see, it has been going down recently. And again, TCG Player, when it comes to May, just in a whole different planet compared to where it once was. A little bit more reasonable down here, like it's pretty close here, but up back a couple of months ago. Again, following this kind of silly trend. Over the past 6 months, it is up only by a little bit, by about $20, $20, $30 over the past 6 months. Has come down from its all-time highs, even from its average market price high. It still has come down a pretty hefty bit. Then we got the Giratina V from Lost Origin. This one has been falling from grace as well. 326 on eBay, 372 on TCG Player, 403 on Card Market. Absolutely crazy. $647 in a PSA 10, nearly 5,000 of them. We go back, we look at the graded price. Wow, you're right. Look at that. It's like nowhere near the peak at all. So we look at $674. It is up, you know, it is up from, you know, about $100 6 months ago. But look at this peak. It was nearly $1,000 in a PSA 10. It has fallen $300 in value over the past couple of months. That is crazy. Like, that's a huge drop. And then again, the average market price, again in May, we see TCG Player in a world of its own, but it does go a little bit closer, a little bit neck and neck more recently. Again, we're looking at prices over what they were 6 months ago, but overall, it has fallen a little bit from what of its all-time high, but it's mainly that PSA 10, which is absolutely crazy drops in that PSA 10, but still a pretty big card and a pretty hefty one right there. And then finally, we have the Art Lugia from Silver Tempest, $178 on eBay, $173 on TCG Player, and $199 on Card Market, $350 in a PSA 10 with nearly 10,000 of them in a PSA 10. Alright, let's take a look at the graded price. So PSA 10, wow, this is going to be similar to Giratina. So it's gone up a little bit by about $100 over the past 6 months. But it did have an all-time high at $472. So it has dropped by about $120 over the past couple of months. So it has dropped from its all-time high in a PSA 10. And if more people are grading it, then that could hurt it. Then we look at the average market price. Pretty good, right? Pretty neck and neck. And this is what I like to see. Little small blips, but that's fine. Overall, very consistent. This is what we like to see. No real, market manipulation there from TCG Player. Pretty even across the board. But over the past 6 months, it has gone up, which is pretty good. It didn't really, hasn't really gone down that much actually compared to some of the others, but it is doing relatively well. So the Lugia is actually doing good. So there you have it, guys. That's what's been going on regarding the biggest cards from the Sword and Shield era. These arts are fantastic. I think all of them are great ones to have in your collection if you're going to grab these. Now, PSA 10 prices across the board have been falling for a lot of these. Some have gone up, but most of them have been falling, especially when you come to the big ones like the Giratina. As we saw quite consistently throughout these, there has been a lot of manipulation regarding pricing on TCG Player compared to the rest of the average market price. So you've got to be careful out there. When you look at TCG Player pricing, you've got to shop around, you've got to look around, you've got to look on eBay. Even if you look at prices over here in the EU, you just got to look around and see if you're paying the right price, especially on the condition of the card, if you want to get it graded. And a lot of these have quite high pop rates, but these are big cards and they do hold good money. So I think right now for the raw prices, I think they're pretty decent to get. I think they will go up over time, especially some of the big, more iconic ones I think will do very well. Stuff like the Giratina, Umbreon, Lugia, I think they're doing very well. Charizard, pretty poor in all honesty from Brilliant Stars, but we've seen big falls from the Gengar and stuff, but a lot of these are still up over the past 6 months in raw pricing, and even the graded pricing, they're still up on the 6-month period, which is still relatively good. But if you bought them at the high, it's going to sting, but I think you could still try and get hold of these right now, especially with the Lost Sword and Shield era sets getting harder and harder to get hold of and more expensive. If you made this far in the video and you've enjoyed it, make sure to smash the like button and make sure to subscribe for more Pokemon content, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments about what's been going on in the LR market. Do you think they're going to be bouncing back? Do you think it's worth it? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I still want to get some of these. A lot of these I don't have. I don't want all of them, but there are definitely some I want to get, like the Lugia, for instance, is definitely one I really want to get, and the Espeon from Fusion Strike. But apart from that, there isn't really much else that I'm after these big arts. That is it from me, guys, in today's video. If you want to watch more Pokemon content, make sure to click the video on the screen, and of course make sure to hit that subscribe button. But as always, thank you so much for watching. You guys are legends, and I'll see you in the next one.